All right, everybody, welcome in and welcome back. Season 4, Episode 7, aka our 120th show. Andy, happy international break and happy non-current events podcast today.
Yeah, honestly, yes. Happy international break. Kind of where I think both of our teams were. I was kind of feeling this weekend. I don't know if you were feeling very happy in that there was no way that my weekend could get worse than it was. It could only get better.
I mean, did you
So
did you watch the Tigers game on Friday night?
I
Oh,
did. I
you're
stayed up until 1 a.m. watching that
Jeez,
that
OP.
sucker.
Yeah,
Um,
same.
my favorite are people saying that this was a classic, and I'm like, this is a classic in how two teams that can't make any sort of offense go.
Yes. Yes.
It was
Multiple
crazy.
runners in scoring position in the extra innings and unable to score runs. Yes.
Yeah, it was more of a what was it, competition to see who, more of a race to the bottom more so than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Who
But
could not lose the game first? Yes.
yes, exactly.
Yep.
And that so, but in terms of the highs and the lows, that was kind of gone. That was kind of gone this weekend, and that was
Yeah.
nice. That was nice. Not that even I don't know if you were touching upon Spain or Argentina for their qualifications.
Meh.
I was barely touching base with England and Italy
Yeah.
for their qualifications. Honestly, I'm more into Ireland now than anything, and they
Nice.
had a nice win this past time. So, like
Nice.
we'd said, I know we wanted to do a different sort of podcast for this one.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we teased it last week. We've kind of been playing around with this. I know this debate has kind of bled into our normal podcast just a little bit, talking about our
mhm.
two, I wouldn't say my favorite manager, but he's probably your favorite manager of all time, but I would say the greatest managers of all time.
Mhm.
And it's an ongoing debate. It always will be, just like the greatest player debate will be. But
Yeah.
Andy, I think, do we want to just jump into it? Do we want to tease who they
Yeah,
are?
I think the only thing I'd want to tease with too is that I think we're fortunate in that the teams that we've supported have these managers who would objectively, even if we were not fans of these clubs, they would be in the discussion. I think there
For sure.
are other managers that we can go into and probably talk about, but I think it's just very fitting that we have two of probably the most prolific and most recently famous managers.
Yeah.
So yes, it touches on some favorites, and sometimes it's like I don't think either of us are going to prove each other right or wrong
No,
in this. That's not the point of the debate. I think
no.
the more the point of the debate is what these managers made us feel, and I think that's honestly too they're one of the big reasons why we fell in love with the sport that that is football.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, kind of going into that, like you mentioned, so my manager who I have selected for this debate actually only managed at Barcelona for 4 seasons, which is kind of wild to think about, because when I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of going back and looking at it, to me, in my mind, obviously going back in time to, when I was pre-teenager into my early teenage years with this manager, it felt like he was there for 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was kind of going back through things, I was like, wow, he actually didn't really spend that much time at the club as a manager. But so for you guys who are wondering, my manager is Pep Guardiola.
Yeah, that was a
And
nice peppy way of doing that.
thank you. Thank you. That was a good pun. So my manager, Pep Guardiola, he originally played for the club, and after playing for the club, spent a couple years moving around to different teams in Serie A, in Saudi Arabia, I believe, for a year, Mexico for a year before finally retiring. And then shortly after retiring, he managed Barcelona B, which is like their young gun team that some of these top clubs have to help develop their talent. And in his first season, he earned the club promotion to the second division of La Liga, which is like La Liga B or something like that. And it used to be La Liga C. or sorry, it was La Liga C is the third division and La Liga B is the secondary division. So he earned promotion on it in his first season as a manager. So that earned him the honors to be called up to the first team manager at a very young age, by the way, a
Mm-hmm.
very, very young age. And so he earned these honors managing the first team in 2008, 2009 for the first time. And in actually, hang on, I think I skipped a year. Give me 1 second. No, actually, that is correct. So his first season with the team, Andy, 0809, he won the treble,
Hmm.
which is wild. I mean, he's the youngest manager to ever do it at 37. And I mean, obviously the talent was there, but I mean, how many managers do you see come in and have instant success? Like very few, right?
Arnie Slot,
Yeah, right.
just today.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think what's impressive is that as a young manager, being able to get the buy-in of those players,
hmm
I think is impressive. More so than
yeah,
just coming in and winning. I think more so than coming in and winning the title off the bat. That's just kind of me personally, kind of
sure.
coming into that.
Yeah, and I think part of that kind of goes back to him as a player, him as a manager of the B team as well. Kind of, he knows the style. He grew up in Catalonia, so he knows Barcelona. He knows the DNA. He played for Johan Cruyff, who played for Barcelona, who managed Barcelona, who kind of brought total football to Barcelona and brought that success to Barcelona. So he kind of knew the DNA, right? That definitely helps. But to implement that and have the success he did, not just the success, but to be able to, I don't want to say dominate football in such a way, but I should say like kind of put his stamp on football in such a
Mm-hmm.
way of his style right away was crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that 0809 season, going back and listening to interviews from Manchester United players of that Champions League final was super telling to me of how his managerial style kind of changed. I wouldn't say changed that game, but how he had such a firm hold on that game and how his style kind of came out through that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, just kind of talking about that style of, little bit of that influence with Johan Cruyff for that total football, that kind of different players having different positions, playing different positions to what best suited them slash what best suited the game, how it kind of changed throughout the course of the game. But also kind of that high pressing is what he implemented. His philosophy was when we lose the ball, we have to get it back within 6 seconds. That was
Mm-hmm.
his goal. That was his everything. And I think you really saw that, especially with his start at Barcelona, but also kind of implementing that possession, that tiki taka, not true tiki taka, just possessing the ball to possess the ball, but possessing the ball with a purpose, right? And
Mm-hmm.
kind of those three things kind of meshing together to form this Pep Guardiola style that he kind of started with at Barcelona. So,
Yeah.
0809, super impressive, right? But then 0910, he wins a sextuple. It's technically the 2009 season. It was kind of a combination. But in the year of 2009, he won a sextuple. First manager to ever do it, right? First club to ever do it. And that kind of team being, arguably, definitely arguably, but in my opinion, probably the greatest team to ever play. And based on trophies, based on the amount of talent on the team, based on their results and everything that they did, I would say. But anyway, that's a debate
Mm-hmm.
for another day.
Yeah.
But being the manager of that successful of a team is amazing, right? 2010 to 2011, he wins the league title and he wins the second Champions League. 11 to 12, he wins Copa del Rey, Club World Cup, but kind of came under fire at Barcelona a little bit for his managerial decisions, kind of ruffling feathers with some of the players, maybe looking for a way to kind of get himself out. Didn't really win any of the major trophies like the league or the Champions League trophy, but the fact that he won 14 of 18 possible trophies in his first 4 seasons, Andy, is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and
It's an
then
insane. It's an insane stat. And
mhm,
I think something that you mentioned upon about the strength of like his concept of football, I think was really telling. Because I know, like, right, because there were two finals where actually Barcelona faced United.
Yeah.
The one you had mentioned, I think, was 0809,
Yep.
which I think stories go, at least on the United end, that if Ferguson had maybe changed who was playing, or had Ji-sung Park marking Messi, might have been a different story. But that, again, I think going to that idea of United had a different kind of thought of their own game,
Mm-hmm.
going against this other kind of clash of, oh, a clash of maybe a little bit philosophies,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of Ferguson old school, and I hate to say that because I think that diminishes his genius,
Yeah.
but a very different idea of playing, coming up against this very newer concept that is more, almost more rigid, but has taken an effect so much into today's game,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we can talk about that a little bit later as you go on. We talk
Yeah.
more about like the impact that he's had, but I
Sure.
think just putting that out there, I think puts into perspective him as a manager, what he's done as a manager.
Yeah, for sure. So then in 2012 to 2013, he takes a year off to kind of reset. He was quoted as saying 4 seasons at Barcelona felt like a lifetime, which, you are kind of in the pressure cooker, Spanish media, all that stuff. I think that's kind of true of a lot of top managers. So, when we get to your manager kind of talking about how he was able to do it for so long, I think is a true testament to him and the success he garnered over the many years at the club. I think that's definitely a huge point because you really don't see that in the modern game. But we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then he moves to Bayern Munich and the Bundesliga. And in the 13-14 and 14-15 seasons, he wins back-to-back Bundesliga titles, wins the DFB Pokal in his first season in 13-14, which is their domestic cup. 15-16 wins the domestic double again. No trophies in 16 and 17. But after that 15-16 season, he moves over to the Premier League. And first season in the Premier League with Manchester City, wins no trophies in 16-17. 17-18 EFL Cup and the Premier League champs for the first time. 18-19 first ever men's domestic treble for England. 1920 wins just the Community Shield. A little bit of a weird season with COVID, obviously. 20-21 wins the domestic double. 21-22 wins his, another Premier League title. 22-23 finally wins the Continental treble, second of his career. 23-24 Premier
Worst day
League
of my life.
champs.
I was
20,
in this. I was in the city that you have brought up in that the day they won the. No, it wasn't. I don't think it was the day they won. No, it might have been the day or the day after they won the treble. It was the day that they were celebrating
yes.
their treble. So yeah, I
Yep.
had to see all that firsthand,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is not my
Which,
favorite. But
from what I
continue.
heard, was kind of a lackluster parade.
I mean,
I
it's
don't know if
Manchester
you.
City fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it
Yes.
was raining. Yes, it was raining. But it
Yeah.
always rains in Manchester.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I was
that's
just
my thought.
that just kind of brings me back to the end of last season in Barcelona's parade and how many people showed up for it. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the videos I saw on social media was the comparison to different clubs' kind of parades and celebrations, and Manchester City's just look pitiful in
Yeah.
comparison.
Right. Right. And I think that's kind of what, that's obviously the ribbing that I give as a Manchester United fan to
Yeah.
Manchester City. That's a classic kind of thought, is because of how small of a club City is. I
Yeah.
mean, they're bigger now. They're much bigger than where they were before they got all their oil money. But
Yes. Yes.
you know, that's just kind of how it goes. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
to continue on with Pep Guardiola and his development
Yeah.
as a manager.
Yeah. So 23-24 wins the Premier League again, first to ever win 4 in a row, Premier Leagues that is. And then 24-25 didn't win any trophies last year, which was only the second time in his entire career that he'd never won any trophies in a year, which is wild. So, and then most recently, Andy, about a week and a half ago, he won his 250th Premier League game, and he won it within 349 matches, which bested Sir Alex Ferguson's previous record of 404 matches. So did it in 55 fewer matches, which is kind of wild to me. Obviously, he's in really rich company there, but just a wild career up to this point and still going. It's one of those things where it would be better to have this debate after Pep was done managing for sure. But I think we have to acknowledge everything he's done up to this point over his illustrious career. So,
Mm-hmm.
just talking about his total trophies. I won't go through all the trophies he won with the individual clubs because that'll just take more time. But 12 domestic league titles, 10 domestic tournament titles, 8 Super Cup esque titles between the Community Shield and the actual Super Cup, 4 Club World Cups, 3 Champions League titles, and 2 trebles on separate occasions, and a sextuple. Actually, I forgot to put that in the notes, but just the influence he's had on the game and kind of how the modern game works is wild as well. Outside of the titles, how he has influenced different managers and how managers kind of put their stamp on the game and how they manage their teams is absolutely crazy to me. So for me, I think Pep's the greatest manager of all time. I think winning two trebles and a sextuple is just crazy if we're just looking stats and trophies. I think we can have a debate, and I'm sure you'll bring this up, about kind of how modern football has changed and how money has greatly influenced modern football and the players that you can get in and what you can do when you have, Middle Eastern countries backing your team or, directly providing funds to your team, right? But I think you can also look at PSG in the Messi and Mbappe era and make the same argument for, like, you can't just buy a team.
Mm-hmm.
Teams have tried to do it before and it doesn't work. You have to have more than that. You have to have a manager, you have to have players, you have to have leadership, you have to have some luck on your side. There's a lot that goes into it. So, that's for me, it's Pep. And I, again, like you mentioned at the start of the podcast, being grateful to have seen him manage the club, and honestly, like, kind of didn't fully appreciate him and the team because I only started really watching Barcelona in the spring of 2011 was kind of my first introduction to it. That's when I started dating Z. So I didn't get the full effect of that 0809, that 29 2010 kind of season. Got to see obviously the tail end of the 2011 season, but didn't fully appreciate everything that he did until after the fact. So
Mm-hmm.
it definitely grateful to have seen that and been a part of that, for even if it was the tail end in that 11-12 season, which was disappointing by Barcelona standards by that point because of the last 3 seasons. But that's kind of the
Yeah.
positives, Andy. So I'll kind of
Yeah.
give you the floor a little bit here to hear any
Yeah.
questions
I
or
think. Yeah. I think
comments you have.
what just comes to mind again is kind of what I alluded to is just I think the influence that he's had on the game where you are now seeing top teams playing like the idea of like playing out from the back
Yep,
of not having your goalkeeper go long and hoof it up like kind of almost like in
every time.
like almost in like in Canadian hockey kind of style of like you dump it down, you
Dump and
launch it,
chase.
yeah, the dump and chase kind of thing of get the ball as far away as you can from your goal, and have your stronger like target men, strong attackers go and win that ball back, establish possession that way.
Yeah.
Um, Completely flipping that on its head and kind of seeing the game and changing the game to how we do it now, or how it's really played now of, playing out from the back. All the best teams do it.
Yep.
That's the style that teams want to play it. They want to dominate the ball in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
changing that has really, I mean, that's changed the whole landscape of the game, right? It's like,
Yeah.
the United States and their teams for, Europe, or sorry, for the World Cup, excuse me, they're focusing on that. They're focusing on how to do all these different styles and trying to adapt and change. And they see like that as the modern way. So to have a manager actually make that change, be that Johan Cruyff,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, I think that's probably the biggest testament to what he's done as a manager.
For sure. Yeah.
I've heard. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say real quick, kind of to piggyback off of that, the implementation of rondos. Andy, I don't know if are you familiar
Mm-hmm.
with rondos?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I am.
So for those listeners who don't know what rondos are, it's it's a training exercise where you have 2 to 3 defenders in the middle of a circle of players. And depending on the level that you're at, you either get 1 touch or 2 touches of the ball to pass the ball around the circle of players, where they're going diagonally across the circle, playing into the person next to you, in the air, on the ground, whatever it might be. Kind of the Pep, I'm sure, wasn't the one who invented it, but kind of
Right. Correct.
implementing it in training and in such a way in the games where basically games became rondo sessions, where 3, 4, 5 guys are just passing the ball in essentially a circle as they're moving, and the defense can't get anywhere close to the ball. I mean, there's a famous clip that I love watching, which is Barcelona Real Madrid, where between Xavi, Messi, and Dani Alves were the 3 main characters during this game. They just passed the ball between the 3 of them for a minute and a half, and Real Madrid couldn't get close. And they are hacking all 3 of them, trying to get this ball, and they're just passing it around like it's an easy rondo session in training. And kind of the implementation of that, and kind of how that has taken over the world of soccer, and how you see it at all levels across multiple countries, these players learning how to do a rondo properly because of how applicable it is in the game, and how US soccer has come under fire because a lot of them refuse to do rondos because there's no forward progression up the field with this training. And it's like, you completely lose the point. The point of soccer is not to just get the ball forward as quickly as possible. It's not
Mm-hmm.
American football.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Right.
possess the ball, outmaneuver the defending team, and score goals, right? And
Yeah.
that the goal of that is not always forward, 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 forward. So,
Right.
it that influence to the ability to affect all levels of the game, and kind of present this style or this training method that has kind of infiltrated all these levels, all these teams, all these countries, to be such an effective way to train players how to play the game, is another point to
Yeah.
his brilliance.
Yeah, because I think just to almost reaffirm that is he didn't invent the rondo, and the rondo had been used by like almost I think every club. That every club did a warm up of a rondo,
Yeah.
but he kind of he changed it in a way that it's almost like it is gospel, and like from what I've heard, he treats those sessions with the rondo as like the pinnacle. Like I think he might even value that over any sort of scrimmage, which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy, right? Like
Right.
we've played sports, we know like when it comes down to how when the coach picks the team, he picks a team based off of how it goes down in actual play.
Yeah.
But to say that like how someone understands and how they treat, that particular exercise, I think does speak a lot to like just his mindset.
Yep.
I guess in terms of like the thoughts I had on Pep Guardiola, like it's no it's no debate that he is one of the best, and I
Yeah.
think that is the best. I think the debate relies on what you value as what you want in a greatest manager. Because I
Sure.
think if you're looking for titles, then Pep Guardiola is up there. So like that
Yeah.
qualifies it absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of conceptually what he's done to really change the game, I
Mm-hmm.
think he is very very high up there. Um, but I think too so that's kind of the value with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the qualifiers that you can level at him are that the teams that he went into, even after Barcelona,
Yep.
were well situated
Yeah.
for
100%.
a manager coming in.
Yeah.
So that I think is a qualifier of like, oh, does that value how good he is? Like,
Yeah.
could he go to the US and do international football and switch that and make them dominant?
Right.
Could he go to a struggling side and try to build them up to get to that point?
Sure.
I think
Without
those are just
with less resources than what he had at City, right? Because
right.
you could make the argument before he came. I mean, City weren't the City they are today, but they weren't a
Mhm.
struggling club either, right?
No,
But
I mean they had one or two of the previous three Premier Leagues at that point, so they were already strong. Just
right.
to say that.
Yeah, and then him coming into there and having the resources to be able to build the squad that he wanted, and it took him time to do it too. I hear what you're saying 100%, right? And I don't think we get as many opportunities to see top managers take a lower tier side, take a struggling club and be able to build them up to a higher level. And I think that's part of where sports has come, or where it's gotten to in the modern age, right? Where all the fans want results right away. And if they don't have consistent results and they have a few bad years, the manager's out and somebody else is replacing them, right? And I think we'll kind of hit this point a little bit when we talk about your manager as well,
Yeah.
of kind of that building up from a lower spot, pushing teams to amazing heights. And I think that he was one of the, I wouldn't say like one of the last, but one of the later few to be able to do that because of the era that he managed in, right?
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying 100%. I would love to see that from him. I want to see him go to the international level and try it there. I want to see him try it with some of these lower clubs and try to build them up and win titles with them as well. I think it'd
Hmm.
be absolute fun. And I think kind of on top of that is some of the things that Pep Guardiola has done for football is make it extremely fun to watch. The game that he has kind of
Hmm.
implemented is a very fun style to watch. It's high octane. There's scoring, defensive pressure to try to create goals. It's created great moments. So it's amazing, you know?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you bring up because I've actually heard the opposite. I have heard that yes, probably as a sport, it's more intriguing to watch,
Yeah.
but I have heard from some players, former players again, so you can take this with a grain of salt from
Yeah.
people from another age, but I think they've also said like you lose sometimes the flair and the sheer brilliance of a player because of what, in the mold of Pep Guardiola, where he has this idea of this
Mm-hmm.
collective and doing things that are flair, doing things that are risky is very bad
That's
in
fair.
terms of. So I think that's one thing. It's almost like kind of like it's almost like an analytic, the baseball like analytics
Mm-hmm.
leveled at there. Once that started coming in,
Yeah.
you're starting to lose a little bit of that. So I think
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there is a little bit of that
Sure.
with Pep Guardiola, but I can also say at the same time, you're seeing better football. I think throughout more so. You're not seeing maybe as much of a dearth between, you know, the top teams and the low teams.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that he's brought to that. So that's a positive. And I don't know how you weigh that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to kind of build on your point too is, it's the idea of team brilliance over maybe individual brilliance is kind of
Hmm.
his motto of playing within the system, doing things, you can have a little bit more individuality if it helps the team. If you're doing positive things for the team, he's not going to, you know, necessarily let a guy out dribble a team and then turn the ball over in a situation where he could have found a pass or a shot. Right. But I get what you're saying 100% because I've heard that too. And, I obviously or managing for Barcelona in such a way where the team created so many brilliant moments because of his system and his style. Great fun. I see the pros, I see the cons, I see the kind of the backlash or the how some people might have an issue with it a little bit more too. But I would say overall, I would say positive impact and created many, many great moments for
Hmm.
the sport of soccer.
Yeah, yeah. I think you can't necessarily say that the what Pep has done is a complete detriment to the game of
Right.
soccer. I think it's changed it. I think jury is still out because I would think we still have to kind of wait and see
Sure.
once his time is out. What are people going to do? Are they going to change? Or are they going to just try to stick and be like, we're just going to keep doing what he had done,
Yeah.
and kind of maybe run it into the ground a little bit. So I
Sure.
think that's it. But I think you can't refute that he is one of the most influential managers in the sport. I think
Yeah.
absolutely you can say he's the one of the most influential. I think you can absolutely say that. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
so
For sure.
lucky
So,
to have him on your side for that
yeah.
little bit of time. So
Yeah, definitely. And fun to kind of watch his career after the fact as well. I will say though, one of the most fun moments was when he was the manager for Bayern and Barcelona beat him like 4-1 or something in the
mhm.
Champions League. That was a fun moment to be a fan.
Yeah, that's a good time to be it. So
Yep.
see, it's all kind of relative sometimes,
Yep.
but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
all good there. So I'll go ahead and share with mine. I don't think it's too crazy to say. It is Sir Alex Ferguson. Um,
Sir.
he is a sir.
He is.
He was knighted in 1999 for the treble, which Pep Guardiola can't say he was knighted by the Queen,
This
for
is
his
true.
treble. I'm
This is true.
the
I don't
Queen
think
might have.
Spain does knighting still.
Yeah, I don't think they do. And well, she would have been he would have been knighted, I think, in England potentially because if he did his stuff there. But
Yeah.
I don't know how that works to be honest.
Yeah,
Plus the
with him being a not
yeah
a native Brit.
yeah yes. So and also I guess since she is no longer with us, it wouldn't be the Queen who could knight her. It would have to be
Yes.
the King.
That would
But
be quite the feat
that
at
would
this
be
point.
yes, that would be honestly at that point you're like something else is happening.
Yes, yes.
Um, so I think the reason I'll kind of say to try to like kind of lead this on is like I mentioned with Pep Guardiola, where if you define greatness by the system that they're able to implement, the influence that they have on the particular game, and even like kind of in a conceptual philosophical mindset,
Yeah,
if you're weighing that as a huge part of what makes something great, then yeah, I think you're probably going to lean more towards Pep Guardiola and
sure.
looking, especially if you look at that short amount of time, what he's run, very concentrated.
Yeah,
But I think if you look at the other side, to me, how I define greatness is overcoming the insurmountable odds or overcoming these obstacles to achieve greatness or
hmm
to achieve a high pinnacle. To me, that's greatness. So not to say that mine is better than anybody else's, but that's just what I value.
sure.
And this is what I think Sir Alex Ferguson really epitomizes because of the influence and impact he has had on the teams that he has been a part of and how he transcends those teams and turns these teams into something they could never dream of being without him. And now, when he does leave, we are still left to say we don't know what our identity is.
Yes,
And because we were still talking 10 years after, no, 12 years after he has left the club, still searching for what that identity looks like. So I can give you a background of his story, and I'll try to focus on what I think is his most influence and impact. And he has this track record of taking teams and making them teams that don't really have that, I guess, background, let's say, or at least recent background to get back and achieve greatness. So, for example, his first start was, I think this was a Scottish, it was a Scottish second league, so kind of like actually like the third league in the whole
sure.
tier structure.
Yeah,
This was his second managerial job. First managerial position was just kind of short, and he went to St. Mirren. And in St. Mirren, he came on in 1974. So this is, can't believe I'm saying this 50 years ago.
jeez, that's crazy to
Um,
think about.
insane. Soccer's a different animal, different thought. But he takes this team that started in the lower half of the second division and ends up getting them to, by 1977, win the Scottish First Division and win promotion there. So they're able to, obviously, in between that time, able to get promoted to get into the Scottish First Division, and then they were able to win that First Division to get promoted into the Scottish Premier League, or Premiership. I'm blanking on what the actual name for their top league is. But he ends up moving there. He ends up moving there in June 1978 to a club called Aberdeen. Um, and one thing you probably know, Paul, but for viewers that or listeners that don't know, in the Scottish Premier League, the only teams that are talked about are Celtic and Rangers.
Yep.
That's who's going to win
Yep.
the league. That is who is going to advance into Europe, hopefully. And that was a little bit of the case here when Ferguson came in. When he had joined Aberdeen, only won one title in their history. But within 2 years, he wins the league in the first time in 15 years that it wasn't Rangers and Celtic. So when I talk about kind of like these insurmountable odds, this is kind of where we're seeing that track record start to come again. Start with St. Mirren of taking this lower performing team, achieving that promotion. So it can take them from, where they're at currently as a culture, as a club, and get them to play better. Obviously with investment, obviously with new talent, that has to happen. But is able to get them to fulfill their potential into something even greater. To me, what I think is kind of probably his best statistic or best fact about him is what happened in 1983, where his Aberdeen team made it into a European final and beat Real Madrid in a Champions League final or European Cup final. Even since then, so that was more than 50 years ago, I don't believe Real Madrid has ever been beaten in a Champions League final if they've gotten to it. And Sir Alex Ferguson still holds that record of being that only team to do that. So again, when you're thinking of the Champions League in soccer, it's usually Real Madrid. They get in, they kind of win it, right? That's kind of the stereotype. That's what people say. And he was able to overcome that and beat that as a manager. So in that also became the third Scottish team to win a European title. So again, like these small things in history, he was able to be like a lot of firsts or, very high up in when these happened for that. So from there, he then moves to, or he wants a bigger challenge, and he goes to Manchester United. And obviously, Manchester United in 1986 had recent history of success. They had won the European Cup in 1966, but it kind of fallen by the wayside as Liverpool were in the ascendancy there.
It's still 20 years. I wouldn't call that recent success.
I mean, recent-ish, but they were big, right? There's still a lot of teams, and they were heavily followed then. So it wasn't like Manchester United was this like itty bitty little team like City, at the start.
Slipped that one in there, didn't you?
I have to. Not necessarily to be, it's not necessarily to be anti-Pep. It's just to be anti-City. That's really what I'm saying here.
No worries. No worries.
So from his time there, when he joined United, I think were second from the bottom when he took over at Manchester United. So they were really close to relegation. It took him actually 4 years to win his first cup, his first trophy in the FA Cup. And there's a lot of talk about that, how if he didn't win that, how that would have changed history, because there were a lot of people kind of calling for his head. They weren't seeing the quote unquote identity. They weren't seeing, the progress at that point.
Yeah.
Which is the wink, wink, nudge, nudge to everybody else of did the same to Ferguson. What happens after that is a trophy haul. He wins 13 Premier League titles by the time he retires, 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, 2 Club World Cups, a couple other European Cups. He wins the first treble ever in England, to be followed by Pep Guardiola. But he was, to say, the first. And his total trophy haul, which I was able to calculate this thanks to my buddy AI, not Allen Iverson. This is artificial intelligence. Calculated that he had then won, yes and no, 49 trophies in his total managerial career, which I guess technically bests Pep Guardiola, but in general, if you look at the amount of time it took for him to get to there, like that was over a almost 50-year career.
Right.
Guardiola has not had that much longer. He's already won those many trophies. So I guess my last kind of thing I want to bring up is how he was able to win, I think, his last Premier League. Where if you look at some of the people that were starting on this team or playing in this team, the names were Tom Cleverley. You still had like, no, I don't think he had Anderson. He had a player named Butner, this left back. You had a very young David De Gea. You had, who else was like a kind of a player that's like, you had Fabio and Rafael de Silva, and these were players that no one knows about now. Like if I
Yeah.
mentioned like Rio Ferdinand was there, yeah, you know Rio Ferdinand, you'll know Nemanja Vidic, you'll know Wayne Rooney was on there, but he also had these other you know center backs and people on this team that ended up winning the Premier League, and they weren't necessarily the most technically gifted. I would think they would struggle to get into teams now, given the level of technical, importance that's put on these players.
Yeah.
But for Ferguson to come after City had climbed up to win the Premier League last or the year before, to kind of not even really overhaul his team, and he hadn't done so, I think, probably from the past 5 years, done
Mm-hmm.
a true reset or a true rebuild. Um, for him to be able to kind of use his communication skills, his leadership style, his understanding of the culture and the club and how he was able to make that work and kind of use his aura to get the best out of those players like a Butner or a Chris Smalling. Um, I think that is very telling of him as a manager, of what he was able to do to wring out all bit of potential, every bit of performance he could get out of his players,
Mm-hmm.
and how whatever mindset he was able to get his players into, whatever thought that he could get them to get these players who really, you'd say, probably have no business being in a title winning side. He was able to get them through. So I think, again, that just kind of shows the different value of what we kind of value in greatness. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, I think it's that ability to do that, to take teams that are struggling, seriously struggling, and able to turn them into champions and serial champions, and not just make it a little fluke and an up and a down. To
Sure.
really take them from the bottom and keep them up and keep them at the top.
Mm-hmm.
To me, is why he's the greatest manager of all time in my book. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that's the favoritism talking
Yeah.
maybe a little bit there,
Well,
but
I think too,
for me
you got to
that's it.
look at, like we mentioned earlier, the longevity of his career, the ability to do it with smaller clubs, with bigger clubs. I mean, he took Manchester United and made them the biggest club in the world at the time when he was the manager. I don't know what we use metrics wise to determine who's the biggest club in the world anymore, if it's social media followers or whatever it was. But by the time he ended his career, his managerial career at Manchester United was the biggest club in the world, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't think anybody can dispute that.
yeah.
The global impact that they had in the late 2000s, early 2010s, mid 2010s,
Hmm.
is it's unmatched for the time,
Yeah,
and any
yeah.
any Premier League or especially Real Madrid. Real Madrid, you can come at me all you want, but Manchester United was the bigger club at the time, 100%.
Hmm.
So, kind of those things, and a couple questions I wanted to ask you, Andy. First of all, what year was that triple win? Because
It
I don't
was
remember when it was.
1999.
Okay. Okay. And then the second one is, what year did he retire as a manager of Manchester United, and how many league titles has Manchester United won since his retirement?
Yep, it was 2013 is when he
Okay.
retired. So, yeah, I think it's a 2013-2014 season. No, 2013. It was 2012 to
Okay.
2013.
Okay. So is that
Um,
last league title that he won?
yep, and United have not won a league title since. I
Yeah.
think they've won maybe 5 cups total,
Uh-huh.
maybe, but that's including like community shields, which I'm like, I don't even
It's
count
a
those because
one-off game kind of thing. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
one-off game that no one really cares about,
Right.
unless you're Crystal
Right.
Palace, and you should care about that because it's a big deal. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
No, and that to me is also the sign of a great manager, right? Is when you leave, regardless of who comes in, if the team struggles, it shows how important the manager was to the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we never want our clubs to struggle. We never want to see a big downfall after an amazing manager leaves the position. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a telltale sign of how great the manager was when teams struggle the way that they do. I mean, you could look at the NFL and look at the Brady Belichick area with the Patriots, right?
Mm-hmm.
After they left, you saw how much they fell. And there's the debate
Mm-hmm.
of, was it Tom, was it Bill, blah 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 blah, right? But there are plenty of other cases, that you can go back and look at over the course of history with coaches and managers, and how once they left, the void that they left and how important they were to said club, said team. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think my biggest thing when I think back on Sir Alex Ferguson, and again, he kind of left the game right around the time that I was getting into the game. So I don't have
Mm-hmm.
as much of a frame of reference as you do when it comes to Pep Guardiola, because he's obviously managed against one of your rivals in the course of the time that you've been a fan, right? But I think my biggest thing when I look back on it is the aura and the presence that he brought to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Both with his club and across the entire game, especially in Europe. So just kind of thinking back and seeing interviews of past players with how they talk about Sir Alex Ferguson, the respect that they give him, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe some controversy around how he led the team in the way that like nobody comes before the club, and how that might have ruffled some of the bigger players' feathers, like Roy Keane
Mm-hmm.
is one that jumps out to me. But just kind of the respect that everybody in the game gives to him and everything that he was able to do, I think was great to see from like
Mm-hmm.
a neutral or like an outside perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
I think it's one interesting point too. You bring up another idea too of this. He came around the time right when the Premier League was getting more and more money, so they were
yeah,
getting more and more managers with kind of different ideas coming in. Obviously,
yeah,
Pep Guardiola didn't come in the Premier League at that time,
hmm,
but you had people like Arsene Wenger, you had people like Jose Mourinho, and you
yep,
had those big names starting to come into the Premier League, and him still being able to assert dominance over them in terms of never going without more than I think 3 years without winning a title.
uh huh,
I think it's interesting, but I think one of the things you can probably give as a thing against him is how come he wasn't able to win more Champions Leagues,
sure,
or did he maybe bow out when he kind of saw the writing on the wall of where the game was going in terms of developing, these more technically kind of sound or very, very tactically focused individuals. Not that he wasn't focused on tactics and he was a very good tactician,
yeah,
but having this idea of like this philosophy and getting certain types of players and certain skill sets and only getting ones around that to make a team work. I think that's a
yeah,
question. Um, I think that's a question that can be raised.
sure,
Um, but I think in general, it's just again, like you had mentioned, I think it's just the aura, the presence that he had. Because I only got started into soccer really on that Champions League final. That's why, like, I made my bet. I was going to say I was a United fan because I had found out Wayne Rooney was playing for United in my silly little World Cup 2010 game. I knew who Wayne Rooney was from that, and then I became a
yep,
United fan because of that. So even then, too, I didn't see like everything that he went through. I only saw him when he had the presence and what it meant for United to be one of the top clubs and having that mystique and that aura of, even just looking at the training ground and it's like, oh, this is where champions train, and that
yeah,
means something different. So
yep,
I think it kind of goes to that.
yeah, for sure, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, two great managers for sure. I think it'll be interesting to see once Pep retires and is done managing, kind of where the two stack up against each other, and two different sets of careers and where they came from, where they got to. But I think overall, just brilliance from both of them,
yeah,
and the change that they brought to the game of football as a whole.
Hmm.
very, very evident, and they kind of had their fingers have slash had their fingers in a lot of offshoots and a lot of evolution of the game uh, up until
Yeah,
recent years, for sure.
absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. As soccer has evolved, as more money has gotten into the sport, I think there are two ways of having huge influence over the game of like almost the cult of personality. You could say maybe with Ferguson and his
Hmm.
ability to lead and have that structure,
Hmm.
um, versus and alongside of a Pep Guardiola individual of a complete remodeled tactician philosopher of the game coming in and
Hmm.
having six success that way. So both
Yeah.
incredibly influential, and honestly, we're just blessed to be a part of it. So, and
Yeah.
this probably was the most tame debate I think we've had,
Yeah.
over probably, which would cause a lot more things. But again, like
Yeah.
this is the fun part in soccer, is seeing this influence going both ways,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. And I think, just the idea of we weren't going to change the other's mind on it, and just kind of appreciate the brilliance of both the managers and kind of
Hmm.
each other's views on how we saw them, how we appreciated them, the joy that we got from them in the time that they managed our clubs. I think it's a fun way to do it, and it doesn't leave anybody angry at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if my hair dryer comes out later in the next 2 minutes. But um, anyway, I think this is kind of the thing where we leave it up to the viewers. You
Yeah.
kind of make, or listeners, excuse me, you make your decision of what, almost like what you decided, what you think is great and what matters more in a manager and
Yeah.
greatness, and you can decide between the two, or you can just say screw it, and you know what, you loved Neil Warnock for as the best greatest manager of all time.
Uh,
You can
or
absolutely say that.
or somebody says Jose Mourinho, and we all both just kind of roll our eyes.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I'd rather have Ange be a better. I'd always say Ange is
Postacoglu,
a
mate.
Postacoglu, mate. It's from Aussie. But anyway, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging with us, guys. We'll be back next week, with back to action in our respective leagues. Big
Yep.
games coming up for us. For United, we face Liverpool, and I just hope it's not in the face. Paul, who do you guys got coming up this week?
Barcelona has. Give me
Do you not
two
know off the
seconds.
top of your head?
Girona. No, I don't
Yeah,
know
if
off
you
the
don't
top of my
know,
head.
okay,
There's a lot going
okay.
on in
That
life
you
right
do,
now.
you do have a lot going on in life. So yeah, it's completely understandable. So bad joke on
Ah,
my end, but
no worries.
anyway, guys, we will be back with that next week. Thanks for hanging with us in this week. But until then, I have been Andy. Paul's been Paul, and with that, I'm wishing you all a big old bye.
Bye.